All right, guys, let's get into the weird triangle video posted by Project FearX on X and YouTube. This is part of my open source intelligence series. So all that we're doing here is going from plausibility on the source data that we're seeing all the way to synthesis and trying to understand what we can see. So the first thing that we're doing is really trying to understand on the data that we're seeing from the data points that we have, cross-reference it, understand what's recording it, and then making sense of it all. And that's what we're going to do here. It's about 35 slides, but I'm going to rush through them because you can always pause. So let's start off with a plausibility check. First of all, some of the footage has properties that make it appear to be an extremely good fake or real. One thing is this here, these little artifacts, they can be seen throughout the image intensified video. These are typical of image intensifier tubes. Unless you're paying extreme amounts of money and select the tubes, they will have deficiencies such as these black spots. That's analog technology, and that's just normal. You can see spots, cracks, and all these kind of things. You can see multiple artifacts, but these are the most pronounced ones. You can see them in almost all of the footage. It's normal. It's an indicator of real footage. The second artifact that we can see in the thermal footage is that, for example, here we're seeing footage that appears to be showing a dark fringe, which would indicate a very different temperature gradient here on this roof of the car. I believe this is part of the image processing to show more contrast, and we are seeing this also on the flying object. And I think this is not indicative of any whatever I read, plasma stealth, whatever. I just think it's part of the image processing of this consumer grade thermal sensors. Here we are seeing the three images. All of them are coherent with what we can observe. We have very different fields of view. This is normal. We have various image artifacts. All of them are normal as far as I can see. The noise pattern, all of this is typical. Something that you can also see in the thermal footage when you play it, it's just static window, is that it seems to pause at some points, which is the calibration point of the thermal sensor. This is also normal. Often you have a click and an actual device that will click when it does that. Some devices delay that, but then you can get into thermal noise, and that's not desirable. So usually it's an auto function. So all of this is consistent. The second part of the plausibility check is where it was taken. Now let's look at this area here. This is a Google Maps screenshot. We have Sacramento up here, San Francisco next to that, then the valley, and down here we have Los Angeles. We have over here Arizona, and here Vegas and Salt Lake City. And between that triangle here is the Nevada Range area with very known sites such as Area 51, Edwards Air Force Base, and whatnot. And here we can also see Tonopah, which is also a site. But now let's look at Las Vegas down here. This is Las Vegas, and you'll be surprised to see how close you can find very sensitive sites to Las Vegas. And I'm going to show you this area here in particular. So here we have Las Vegas down here as we had previously, but here we have some very unprecise mountain area with weird names like Mercury or Sugar Bunker. And we are going to look at two sites. First off, we look at this very nondescript valley down here. Then we look at this site over here. This site over here is, by the way, Area 51, but I just want to give you some context by showing you this valley here before on how sensitive this area is. And as you can see, it's in close proximity to Las Vegas, but it's actually not so close when you look at the size of Las Vegas as a city. It's multiple times the distance of Las Vegas, and you can also see the size. This valley here is the size of Las Vegas, and also this area here is close to the size of Las Vegas when you look at the entire area that it spans. So let's look at that valley. It looks absurdly organized in a sense. On the left, you have an access road layer. Then we have access to various sites and all of these detonation holes in the ground that you can see. Now, you may wonder what it is, if it's a bomb range. No, this is far more serious business. These are all craters of nuclear explosions. The United States did their nuclear testing here. They just blew things up here. So you can see how sensitive that is. They just literally blew up the first nuclear bombs in the 50s, 60s, and who knows how long it went, down here in this valley. This is how sensitive this area is. The second part on the top right of that is the actual Area 51. As you can see here, there's a very large base facility with who knows what. You can see also access patterns going towards the mountainside. I'm not going to speculation on all the things there, but this is Area 51, the area. And in this greater area, they seem to have filmed this footage. So that is plausible in regards to, is it an environment where stealth and, let's call them, prototypical, non-public aircraft are tested black projects, as they call them? Yes. Now let's look at another footage. This is footage that I personally took, and it shows, and I'll just let it run here, 3 or 4 F-35 rolling to take off. I was not present at the device at this point in time. I was doing something else, and so it's not perfectly in focus, but we will understand some factors of thermal imaging with devices similar to the ones that they used to film their video. I think the sensor's resolution is similar. And we can see here on these F-35s, and this is white hot footage, that you always have some thermal signature. And this is the important part here. You can see this bubbly, bouncy pattern here. And this is not afterburner. This is just the hot air from the idle taxi engine. And F-35s have very powerful engines. They're single engine, but they're very powerful jets. And you can see this pattern on all the jets. You can see some let's say, flashing and oscillating exhaust pattern here. All the jets show it to a lesser degree. If it's not an afterburner, it will still show a very long tail. And as you can see here, they're just standing here taxiing, and you can also see a rather hot core of the engine here in the back. And all these, and you can see the people walking by that it's white hot because the head was white. Also the cars, they have hotter engines, hotter wheels. So you can see here, all the planes have this little, let's say, this shockwave effect of hot air leaving the engine core. And you saw the stuttering. That's the stuttering that I'm talking about when it comes to thermal vision recalibrating itself. So all the jets have that, and that should just be appreciated, that this is absolutely normal, this behavior. You can see non-visible, non-afterburning exhaust in thermal on planes. That's the important part that I wanted to show here. Because it's an objection that I made immediately when I saw the footage, okay? So I'm just following up. You can see here all these engines idling away with the bubbly exhaust clearly visible. It's even visible on race cars, for example. And we see a second footage here. This is just a still from a promotional video from Teledyne. This is an MWIR system of commercial or government grade. And this is a 737, as you can see. And you can see extremely hot exhaust here. And we all know the 737 doesn't have afterburners. So this is a very, very common pattern on infrared systems. This is important to know. And then we have a second footage. I also took this footage. We're going to see 2 Eurofighters that are climbing out of their airbase and flying somewhere. The most important part that you should pay attention to here is these aircraft are not an afterburner, because the Eurofighter will supercruise all the way up to Mach 1.2 plus on military thrust. And these are below so the speed of sound, so they must be at a power setting quite below max dry thrust. And with everything handheld thermals, it's hard to really keep them steady. And you can see here sometimes there is a contrail pattern forming, which is absolutely normal on the different spots of air. And as you can see, these have very, very distinct engine trails showing, and these are not an afterburner, I repeat. If we pause the video, we can also see that now we can see the thermal recalibration pause. You can also not really see the canard wings, which is also normal because the systems blend in. And this video here, and this was not far, was one of the first reasons why I didn't think the footage was realistic when I saw the first picture, because this is a good sensor. This is also zoomed in, and we don't see the size of the jet. We can see actually very tiny objects that we can barely make out. So I immediately said, look, it doesn't show an exhaust trail. It doesn't show the size that we would want to see on sensor, because objects are tremendously small in thermal vision unless they're really close, right? So this was my evidence that it's probably not the real deal that they've shown. Now let's dive into this. I will skip this in a second. This is the stuff that the systems that they use. And for us, it's important to understand that this is the lens, the optical resolution of the lens, and the sensor type. It has a bigger screen, but the sensor is what matters. And we can basically calculate everything from these data. And actually, when we look at the spec, it says a 7.3 degrees horizontal field of view. It actually matches exactly what we can directly calculate from the sensor and lens data, which is what we want. We will get to that in a second. This is for us super important because this allows us to create a real data point that we calculate. And the interesting part is when we know the sensor field of view or the sensor resolution, we can understand one thing. We can understand, so to say, this angle, theta here, that you can see. And this tells us one of two things. We either know how large the object is, then we know how far away it is, or we know how far away it is, and then we can derive the size from it. It's very straightforward, right? And so this gives us this, let's say, channel of size that is easy to calculate with the I think in English it's called the radiant calculation. So it's quite simple. And when we do that to this object, we can take the video here that they've done, and we know that the sensor is 600 to 640 pixels wide in the output. It's been scaled up to 2000 something pixels in the video. That's fine, but we know the underlying sensor. We know it's a 3.5x zoom, and we know we can measure the length of the object here. This gives us an understanding of all the data that we need to calculate this. And now we have the field of view from the sensor and the pixel angle, so that's these two lines, so to say, and the span of the object. This is 170 pixels over, since it's a 2:480 wide picture, we need to scale it down by 3.85, so we get a 44 pixel object span on sensor. And this gives us the true angular size. Now, when we do that, we only know this number here, theta, which is what we want, because then these others are linearly related to each other. So if the plane that we saw is 30 meters long, it was about 3,421 meters away from the people when they've taken the picture. And this is the number one remaining objection that I have, because in the video we don't hear anything. This is why I also immediately asked for sound. But it's not untypical on a very low setting jet engine. It's practically idling. So it's not a strong counter argument, but that's really what we're getting from the sensor and the object size. So we can derive that it must have been really close to them. or it must be extremely large. But I think the real size of the plane will be somewhere between 22 to 28 meters. That's my personal estimate, and that's why I included this distances here. So it was either 2.5 to 3.2 kilometers away. So now that we know that, let's make sense of all of it. What is it? Something flew by. Let's assume it's real. Let's say 2.5 to 3 kilometers away. When we follow up with the internet, we can see, or the TikToks, we can see they can't build that. The Chinese are ahead because they publish these videos or intentional overflights of cities with some tailless jets, and China got no tail 6th gen. US has fed Amy lol. This kind of attitude. And now we really need to circle back and contextualize this. This is 1996. Boeing flew the YF-118G, called the Bird of Prey. That's an actual picture of the thing. It looks like, I don't know, from a science fiction movie. Yet it flew in 1996 when probably most people curious about the topic weren't even born. And today it's in a museum. You can see it over here, ahead of, on top of the F-22 model in the Air Force Museum. So it's real. It's not even tiny. There was someone sitting in there flying that thing, and it's no tail. It's absolutely bizarre how that thing flies, but apparently it flew. And that's 1996. Let's go ahead 1 year. Also Boeing, the X-36 drone. It was a smaller craft, but I call it a drone. You can see some mock-up picture here because it was like a 1-to-6 or something model of people on the mock-up cockpit. But it was just a demonstrator. But we can see some extremely exciting things here because it really flew and it was already a drone. You can see also here some sensors under speed tape, some wires that they put on there. So it was a real prototype and it really flew. 1997. And let's rephrase that. This is 1997. What was also 1997 is this. Just to give you guys the context, and the US couldn't have done it. This is ASCI Red. It's a supercomputer of, I think it was like 9,500 Pentiums or something. Just to contextualize this was the best computer in 1996 or 1997, up to 2001, I think. Let's compare that to what we have today. This thing is 100 times slower than a high-end desktop today. It used 850 times the power to be 100 times slower. And it was almost 10,000 times more expensive. But that's an unfair comparison, right? Just to show you how technology progressed since that thing there flew. So the Ryzen is the RTX 5090 is an unfair comparison. Let's go and make it fair. An iPhone 17 Pro Max is twice as fast. It costs 85,000 times, it consumes 85,000 times less electricity to produce 2 times the output. And you can literally put it in your pocket for $1,200 instead of spending $50 million just to build it and millions to just run it. That's the technological progress that we're talking about, okay? And now we go to the next data point, and that's that one here. That's the XF103 or 108 engine from Pratt & Whitney. This is the only other data point apart from the front end of the plane that was released. And we really want to understand what we're seeing here to answer the question on the thermal part and the exhaust part. And we can assume the following. This here in the rear is just a shaping element. And we can see this is obviously the cold and this is the hot part of the engine. But I believe we have data to give us even more information about the engine that is public and not classified. And that data dates back almost 15 years. Oh, sorry. Next slide is that. So here we have a concept of the variable cycle engine, which this engine is here. And we can already see a few things. We can see the internal exhaust. And there's an external part. And I believe all these engine components are very interesting. But from this graphic here, we are only seeing the green part. We are not seeing the other part. And we have significantly strong data from the US government to corroborate that. And let's go to that. The Advent engine design concept. This is approved for public release. We're working with open source intelligence here. And we can see here, there is an engine that does this. And it has, as we can see here, tremendously improved efficiency, especially at low power settings. Extremely improved efficiency. And that plane was at a low power setting. So it doesn't need fuel, so to say, to propel it. And it probably has a very efficient mixing exhaust, as we can see. Now let's look at this again. We can see that the engine is actually built into an outer structure that houses or that propels this forward fan area, a bypass. And so it's a bypass design with cold air. We can see this also here. There is the bypass part out here. So all this inner part is only for the hot core, and this being very much spread out. And if we rotate the picture, we can see how this here fits that in orientation somewhat, okay? And there are a bunch of theories around this engine. The first theory could be that we're missing a frontal part here, or that here we could see some bypass, but I don't think so. I think this engine is not a full representation of the actual engine, but it is just the hot core, and there is more shroud going around it, and all the thermal signature reduction, and all of that is just not shown, because that's the real magic, and that's a likely scenario. But the confirmed part, at least, is the part that it's going to use tremendously low amounts of fuel, which also means low amounts of heat emission at low power settings. Now let's look at the plane, and if we can derive something from that guys have taped. And we can see a few things here. We can see that there is a constantly visible, and the way the thermal works is not on every frame you will see this, but it seems to be a recurring pattern that this is a two-engined, or at least it has two distinct areas of heat being created. And in some pictures you can also see a bit of smudging to the rear that could be exhaust residue. So yeah, I think we can see a two-engine configuration in some sort of way here, where we see the external engine heat on the bodywork of the vehicle. And I've run this through some sort of diffusion AI, because they usually have a pattern. I don't like using AI for, let's say, intelligence work, because it invents pixels out of nothing, but it also reinforces existing structures. And this is good, because if there is something missing, we can just overemphasize it. And this is what I've done here. And there we can see that this is the typical pattern that is pulsing through the video. And I would think that so there are some areas where heat seeps through the bodywork, or some sort of pattern is at least visible there. And I think that's kind of where we're getting to. And that's why I think it's legit, because we're seeing a combination, what I believe, of not the greatest sensor and some post-processing in the device, which is always there on thermal devices. We have a very low power setting with an extremely efficient engine, extremely efficient airframe that probably just needs idle thrust to fly, who knows. And it has an extraordinarily exhaust technology system that masks in with environmental air and whatnot. I think this is just a combination of things. So I think it's legit for these reasons. Now let's look at the airframe. For me, it was an interesting shape. And we go back to the delta configuration. We see this delta or diamond configuration in most of the modern planes. And I think that we will have a variant of a cranked arrow wing design here. And I'm trying to blend this out. I believe starting from the front, we have this, I would call it arrowhead snout, probably with a bit of curvature to it. We don't know, could be an artifact. Combined with shape-wise X-36 type of canard configuration and cranked arrow delta wing basic design here with a bit curvature in the front and these rear, let's say, these rear appendages. And they added some of these bird of prey wingtip devices, I would say, in some sort of variant to a basic cranked arrow delta configuration. And they've refined that with a double spike tail of that single X-36 tail. We can see two of those here, probably masking each an engine in each of those. That is my synthesis on what this plane is configured to be. Now, what plane is it, though? That's the question. We know that the NGAD competition has been between Lockheed Martin and Boeing. We know that there have been confirmed flights of this unspecified prototypes, and there is a high likelihood that there are two distinct designs, such as in this previous competition between the YF-23 and YF-22. So this would be, I would say, not uncommon that there is a competition between two highly different designs conceptually, and I believe we're seeing the same here. Then there was the 2022 here from Warzone Lockheed Martin design. And I believe this one is, in my opinion, the very different Lockheed Martin design prototype that was leaked just maybe to throw people off, but I think it's an intentional leak. And this is my theory on this. No data to this. It's just a theory based on the fact that they will probably have two different configurations in competition. And then we have another thing where we can use the F-22 here from this found on Reddit picture. There is a significant difference between the Y and the production variant, and the F-47 has not flown. So my gut feeling is that this is a YF-47 prototype being flown by Phantom Works to prepare the world for the F-47 and to pre-leak it. That's what I think. Congratulations, guys. I also think that this is tremendous what they've found and what they've done, and I believe it's legit. So thank you all. These are my 2 cents on this.